The station alarm cut through the quiet night cycle like a knife. Red lights flashed in every corridor of Helios 7, and the automated voice repeated the same message in 12 different languages. Lockdown. All personnel returned to quarters. Lockdown. Kang Dae-won looked up from his research pad, blinking, tired eyes. He had been reviewing growth patterns in the hydroponic bay for the past 3 hours. The plants didn't care about station time, and neither did he most days. Sleep came when it came. He stood and stretched, his modest quarters in the botanical wing suddenly feeling smaller with the flashing red lights. Through his window he could see the gas giant they orbited, its storm swirling in shades of purple and gold. Beautiful. Peaceful. Unlike whatever chaos was happening on the station right now. The comm system crackled. Security Chief Velthorax's voice came through, and even translated through the universal system. Dae-won could hear the edge in it. The fear. My cubs are missing. All personnel are to remain in their quarters until they are found. Anyone found in the corridors will be detained and questioned. Dae-won felt his stomach drop. He had seen the security chief's children around the station a few times. 3 small Kravathi, barely reaching his waist, with scales that hadn't yet darkened to their father's obsidian black. They still had that juvenile brightness about them, curious and playful. He knew what it meant when a Kravathi's children went missing. The species was known across the galaxy as apex predators. They came from a world where everything hunted and everything was hunted. Their reflexes were faster than most species could track. Their strength could bend steel. Their protective instincts over their young were legendary and terrifying. Dae-won had been on the station for 6 months now. In that time, he had learned to keep his head down and his interactions minimal. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and the reputation that preceded them made things complicated. Death Worlders, they called his species. Earth was classified as a Class 12 Death World, a place where gravity was crushing, where the weather could kill, where the native life had evolved to survive conditions that would destroy most civilized species. Humans were survivors of that nightmare world. But survivors didn't mean warriors, at least not in the way other species expected. Dae-won was a botanist, a scientist who spent his days with plants and soil samples. He was 170 centimeters tall and weighed maybe 70 kilograms. Next to species like the Kravathi or the Scaleth, he looked fragile. That fragility made other species nervous. They couldn't understand how something so physically unremarkable could come from such a dangerous world. So they avoided him, gave him space, treated him with careful politeness that barely masked their discomfort. Dae-won didn't mind. He had his work. He had his plants. That was enough. The hours crawled by. Through the comm system, he could hear the search progressing. Security teams sweeping every sector, other species being questioned, their voices high with stress. No one wanted to be the one who had harmed Velthorax's cubs. The consequences would be unthinkable. Dae-won tried to return to his research, but concentration was impossible. Somewhere on the station, 3 small children were missing, lost or hiding or scared. The thought made his chest tight. He knew that feeling. The fear. The confusion of being small in a world too big and too complicated. Around the 4th hour of lockdown, his door chimed. Dae-won frowned. He approached carefully and checked the external camera. Security officers stood outside, 4 of them. 2 were Scaleth with their heavy armor and weapon harnesses. 1 was a Talarian, insectoid and unreadable, and leading them was Velthorax himself. The Kravathi security chief stood over 2.5 meters tall. His scales were the color of polished obsidian, and his eyes were the bright yellow of a predator who saw in spectrums Dae-won couldn't imagine. He looked every bit the apex hunter his species was known to be. Dae-won opened the door and stepped back immediately, hands visible and open. Non-threatening. "Security Chief, how can I help?" Velthorax's eyes fixed on him, and Dae-won felt the weight of that gaze. This was a creature that could kill him in seconds, and right now that creature was desperate and dangerous. The human, Kang Dae-won. Velthorax's voice was a deep rumble. "You work in the botanical wing. Sector 7. Yes, sir. My cubs were last seen on security footage heading toward this sector 3 hours ago." Dae-won's mind raced. The botanical wing was mostly automated. The hydroponic bays, the research labs, the storage areas. Very few personnel worked here, especially during night cycle. It was quiet, private, a good place for scared children to hide. "I haven't seen them, sir, but I've been in my quarters for the past few hours." They might be in one of the bays. There are a lot of places to hide among the plants. Velthorax studied him for a long moment. Then he turned to his security team. Search every room, every storage closet, every bay. Find them. The team dispersed and Velthorax remained standing in Day One's doorway. The silence stretched uncomfortably. They are young, Velthorax said finally, his voice lower now. Still learning caution. The station is too large. Too many strangers. Too many dangers they do not understand. Day One heard the fear beneath the words. This wasn't the terrifying predator everyone else saw. This was a father worried sick about his children. We'll find them, Day One said quietly. The station's in lockdown. They can't have gone far. They're probably just hiding, maybe scared by something. Kids do that. Velthorax's eyes fixed on him again. You speak as though you know children. I knew one once. A long time ago. The Krivati tilted his head, reading something in Day One's expression that made him pause. But before he could respond, a voice crackled through his comm unit. Sir, we found something. Bay 7, the humans' private quarters. Velthorax moved immediately, his massive form surprisingly graceful as he headed down the corridor. Day One followed, his heart pounding. His private quarters. The small room attached to his lab where he sometimes slept when experiments ran long. The security team stood outside the door, weapons drawn but not aimed. They looked confused, uncertain. Velthorax approached and pushed the door open carefully. Inside, on the floor surrounded by cushions and blankets, 3 small Krivathi cubs slept peacefully. And sleeping beside them, curled protectively around their small forms, was Kang Day One, except it wasn't. Because Day One was standing right here in the corridor. The human on the floor stirred, sensing the presence. He opened his eyes slowly, saw the armed security team, saw Velthorax standing there, and very carefully, very quietly, he raised one finger to his lips, the universal gesture for quiet. Then he pointed at the sleeping cubs beside him. The corridor fell absolutely silent. No one moved. No one breathed, because they had just found the predator's missing cubs, sleeping safely beside a human, and nothing about that made any sense at all. The moment stretched impossibly long. Velthorax stood frozen in the doorway, his predator's mind trying to process what his eyes were showing him. His 3 cubs, his precious children, were curled up against a human. Not just near a human, against him, touching him, sleeping peacefully while the human's body curved around them like a shield. The human moved slowly, carefully extracting himself from the nest of blankets without disturbing the cubs. He stood, and Velthorax saw that he had given his own blanket to cover the children. The human's sleep clothes were rumpled, and there were cushions scattered around that didn't belong to standard station quarters. On a small table nearby sat plates with food remains. Velthorax's trained nose identified the scents immediately. Human food but modified. The proteins adjusted for Krivathi digestion. The spices reduced. Someone had carefully prepared this food specifically for his cubs. The human stepped toward the doorway, moving with careful precision. He kept his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. They came to my door about 4 hours ago. They were scared. I couldn't just leave them out in the corridor. Velthorax felt a growl building in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him. This creature had taken his cubs, had lured them, had hidden them. But the evidence before his eyes contradicted the instinct. The cubs were unharmed. More than unharmed. They looked peaceful, content, and they were purring. That sound stopped Velthorax cold. Krivathi cubs only purred when they felt completely, utterly safe. It was a sound from the nest, from the protection of family. They did not purr around strangers. They certainly did not purr around potential threats. Explain, Velthorax said, his voice tight with controlled tension. Explain how my cubs came to be in your quarters. Day One glanced back at the sleeping children, then stepped fully into the corridor. The door remained open so they could see the cubs. He kept his voice low. This isn't the first time they visited. It started about a week ago. I was working in the hydroponics bay and they found their way in. I think they were curious about the earth plants I was growing. They asked me questions. One of the Scaleth security officers shifted his grip on his weapon. You did not report contact with the security chief's offspring. They were just curious kids. I didn't think it needed reporting. I showed them some holograms of earth animals. They seemed interested in the pictures. After that, they came back a few times. Always together. Always during the day cycle when the botanical wing was quiet. Velthorax felt his claws extend involuntarily. You kept this from me. They asked me not to tell anyone. They said they'd get in trouble for wandering off. Day one met the Krivathi's eyes and there was no fear there. Just calm honesty. I should have told you. That was wrong of me. But they weren't in danger. They were just curious and I enjoyed the company. Through the open door, one of the cubs stirred. Kren, the oldest, raised his head and blinked sleepy eyes. When he saw his father standing in the doorway surrounded by armed security, his eyes went wide. Papa? Velthorax moved instantly, crossing into the room and dropping to his knees beside his son. His large hands capable of crushing steel touched his cub with infinite gentleness. Kren, you are unharmed? Yes, Papa. The cub looked confused by the question. We were sleeping. Day one told us stories about earth whales. They're very big animals that swim in water deeper than the station is tall. The other two cubs were waking now. Yola and Thresh blinked up at their father, then looked toward the doorway where Day one stood with the security team. Are we in trouble? Yola asked in a small voice. Velthorax didn't know how to answer that. He checked each of his cubs carefully, his hands running over their scales, checking for injuries that weren't there. They were fine, healthy, happy even. Completely at ease. Why did you come here? He asked finally. Why did you leave our quarters without permission? Thresh, the youngest, huddled close to his father. The dark cycle noises scared us. The station makes strange sounds at night. Yola said we should be brave, but I was still scared. Kren said we could go visit the human. He makes us feel safe. Safe, Velthorax repeated, the word feeling strange. You feel safe with the human. All three cubs nodded. He shows us things, Kren explained. And he talks soft, not loud. And he doesn't get angry when we ask too many questions. Teacher Velen says we ask too many questions, but Daywan says questions are how we learn. Yola sat up, her scales brightening with excitement despite the tense atmosphere. And he makes good food. He said human food is different, but he could make it safe for us. It tasted strange but good. Velthorax looked back at the human still standing in the corridor. Daywan's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes kept returning to the cubs, making sure they were all right. A protective instinct that Velthorax recognized because he felt it himself every moment of every day. The station was in lockdown, Velthorax said. You heard the alarms. Why did you not report immediately that my cubs were here? I couldn't exactly leave them, Day one said simply. They were already asleep when the alarm went off. Moving them, waking them, that would have scared them more. I figured it was safer to stay put and wait for security to find us. I knew the search would reach the botanical wing eventually. It was logical, practical, but it didn't explain everything. You gave them your blanket, Velthorax observed. You slept on the floor with them. The floor is not that uncomfortable, and they were cold. Krivathi run warmer than humans, right? They needed the extra covering more than I did. One of the security officers, the Talarian, made a clicking sound that translated as disbelief. The human chose discomfort for offspring that are not his own. This behavior is unusual. Day one's expression flickered with something. Pain, maybe, old pain. They're kids. All kids deserve to feel safe and warm. That's not complicated. Velthorax stood slowly, his full height making the small quarters feel even smaller. He looked at the human, really looked at him. The small creature from the death world. This botanist who spent his days with plants and avoided social contact with other species. This being who had fed his cubs, told them stories, given them comfort when they were scared, and protected them through the night. You could have called security immediately, Velthorax said, reported them the moment they arrived. That would have been the correct procedure. Yes, you chose not to. Yes. Why? Daywan was quiet for a moment. Then he glanced at the cubs who were watching the conversation with wide eyes. Because sometimes what's correct and what's right aren't the same thing. They were scared. They needed someone to tell them it was okay. I could be that someone. Velthorax felt something shift in his understanding. In Krivathi culture, the protection of cubs was the highest duty. It superseded law, protocol, even personal safety. To protect a cub, any cub, was to act with honor. This human had done exactly that. Papa, Kren said quietly, are you angry at Day one? Velthorax looked at his son, then at the human, then back at his cubs who were clearly more concerned about their new friend's well-being than their own situation. No, he said finally. I am not angry. But we will discuss proper procedures for when you wish to visit someone, and you will never leave our quarters during dark cycle without permission again. Understood? All three cubs nodded quickly. Velthorax turned to his security team. Stand down. The cubs are found and safe. Lockdown can be lifted. As the team dispersed, Velthorax remained, looking at the human who had somehow befriended his children without him even noticing. We will speak more of this, he said, later. Day One simply nodded, and Velthorax gathered his cubs to take them home, his mind full of questions that had no easy answers. The news spread through Helios 7 like electricity through water. By the start of the next day cycle, every being on the station knew that Security Chief Velthorax's cubs had been found sleeping beside the human. The story grew with each retelling, details shifting and changing, but the core remained the same. A human had been alone with Krivathi cubs, voluntarily, and the cubs had been perfectly safe. Day One noticed the change immediately. Where before he had been avoided and ignored, now he was stared at. Other species would stop their conversations when he walked past. Security officers watched him with new intensity. In the commissary, tables would fall silent when he entered. It was deeply uncomfortable. He tried to focus on his work. The hydroponic systems needed regular maintenance, and he had 3 experiments running that required daily monitoring. But even in the quiet of the botanical wing, he felt observed, watched. On the 3rd day after the incident, Velthorax appeared at his lab. The Krivathi security chief stood in the doorway, blocking most of the light from the corridor. He wore his official uniform, but his claws were retracted and his posture was neutral, not threatening. Not yet, may I enter? He asked. Day One set down the growth analyzer he had been calibrating. Of course. It's your station. Velthorax stepped inside, and the small lab felt impossibly cramped with his bulk. His eyes scanned the space, taking in the neat rows of plants, the organized equipment, the few personal items Day One kept on a small shelf. A photograph, some books, a carved wooden figure. Your cubs are well? Day One asked when the silence stretched too long. They are, and they have asked about you repeatedly. They wish to visit again. Ah, I told them they could not. Not without my permission and not without supervision. That's reasonable. Velthorax moved closer, studying the photograph on Day One's shelf. It showed a much younger human man with a woman and a small child. All 3 were smiling. Your family, Day One's hand stilled on the equipment, was a long time ago. They are deceased. It wasn't a question, but Day One answered anyway. Yes, 7 years ago. Transport accident. The ship's environmental systems failed during a routine supply run. By the time rescue arrived, it was too late. Velthorax was quiet for a long moment. You had a cub of your own, a daughter. She was 6 years old. Day One's voice was steady, but something in his eyes was not. Her name was Yunji. She liked plants like me. We were going to start a garden together when they got back from visiting my wife's family. I did not know. The records did not mention this. I don't put it in records. It doesn't help anything. They're gone and I'm here, and that's how it is. Velthorax understood loss. Every Krivathi did. Their world was harsh and survival was never guaranteed. But to lose both a mate and a cub at the same time, that was a wound that would never fully heal. This is why you helped my cubs, he said slowly. You understand the value of protecting children. I understand that kids get scared. And when they're scared, they need someone to tell them it's going to be okay. Even if you're not sure it will be, you still say it. Because they need to hear it. Velthorax thought of his own cubs huddled in the dark, frightened by sounds they didn't understand. They could have come to him, should have come to him, but instead they had gone to this human they barely knew. Why did they trust you? He asked. My cubs are raised to be cautious of other species. I teach them to be aware of danger. Yet they went to you without fear. Day One considered the question. The first time they came to the hydroponics bay, they were very careful. Stayed by the door. Yola asked if the plants were dangerous. I told her no, they were just plants. Earth plants. I offered to show them if they wanted, and they accepted. Eventually. Kren asked a lot of questions first. Smart kid. He wanted to know about Earth, about why I was growing these specific plants, about whether humans ate plants or just studied them. I answered everything honestly. Then what? I showed them a hologram of Earth, the oceans, the forests. The animals. They were fascinated by the whales, those massive creatures that swim in water deeper than any ocean on Krivath. Thresh asked if humans could swim like whales. I told him humans swim, but not like that. We're not built for it. Velthorax listened carefully. This was important, though he was not yet sure why. Then I made a mistake, Daewon continued. I accessed some old files from Earth, family videos. My daughter playing in a park, feeding birds. She was laughing, and Yunji had the best laugh. It filled up a whole room. The cub saw this. Yes, and Yola asked if that was my cub. I said yes. She asked where my cub was now. I told her the truth in simple terms. That there was an accident and my family was gone. That I missed them. You showed vulnerability to my cubs. I suppose I did. Daewon picked up the photograph, looking at it for a moment before setting it back down. Kran asked if I was sad. I said yes, sometimes I was. But I also had good memories, and those made me happy. Then Thresh did something I didn't expect. What did he do? He walked over and put his small hand on my arm. Just rested it there. He didn't say anything. Just touched me, like he understood that sometimes you can't fix sadness with words, but you can be there anyway. Velthorax felt something tighten in his chest. That was instinct, pure pack-bonding behavior. His cubs had recognized grief in this human and had responded with comfort. After that, they visited more often, Daewon said. Each time they stayed a little longer. Asked more questions. I showed them more Earth things. Taught them some basic words in Korean, my native language. They taught me some Krivathi. It was nice. I haven't had many friends on the station. Other species avoid you. Yes, I'm used to it. Humans are new to the galactic community, and we have a reputation. Deathworlders. Survivors. But survival doesn't mean strength, not the way most species think. We're actually pretty fragile compared to you. Velthorax made a sound that might have been agreement. Your physical strength is limited. Your speed is unremarkable. Your senses are inferior to most predator species, yet your world is classified as highly dangerous. This contradiction confuses many. Earth is dangerous because everything there learned to survive, not because they were the strongest or fastest, because they adapted, because they worked together, because they were smart enough to find ways to stay alive despite being surrounded by things that wanted to kill them. You are pack-bonding species. We are. Humans evolved in groups. We survived because we protected each other. Because we shared resources. Because we took care of the young and the old and the injured. That instinct is still in us. Velthorax paced the small lab, his mind working through implications. You pack-bonded with my cubs. I suppose I did. I didn't plan to. It just happened. And now the station knows that a human protected Krivathi cubs. This changes how they perceive you. How they perceive all humans, Daewon shrugged. Maybe I just did what felt right. I didn't think about politics or species relations. They were scared kids and I could help them feel safe. There was a knock at the lab door. Both of them turned to see a human woman standing there. She was taller than Daewon, with short dark hair and an energy that seemed barely contained. She wore an engineering uniform. Sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice bright. I'm Park Hana, just transferred to the station. They told me there was another human in the botanical wing. Thought I'd introduce myself. Daewon blinked. Another human. On the station? That was unexpected. Hana stepped inside, seemingly unbothered by Velthorax's intimidating presence. Wow, this is a great setup. You growing earth plants? Can I get some vegetables? The commissary food is okay, but I'm dying for some proper vegetables. Velthorax watched the new human with interest. Where Daewon was quiet and careful, this one was loud and open. The difference was striking. I can probably arrange some vegetables, Daewon said slowly, off balance from the sudden social interaction. What are you looking for? Anything green. Spinach, lettuce, bok choy. Oh, and peppers if you have them. I love spicy food. As the two humans talked, Velthorax observed. Same species, completely different personalities. Yet both seemed to have that same quality underneath. That openness. That willingness to connect. He thought of his cubs and their questions. He thought of Daewon's careful kindness and this new human's unbridled enthusiasm. He thought of the way the station had reacted to one simple act of protection. Humans were going to change everything. He could feel it. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for that change. The next 2 weeks brought changes to Helios 7 that nobody had anticipated. Park Hana turned out to be exactly what her first impression suggested. energetic, social, and completely unbothered by the reputation that made other species nervous around humans. She fixed things. That was her job. Environmental systems, power distribution, communication arrays. If it was broken, she could repair it. And she talked to everyone she met while doing it. Daewon watched with quiet amazement as Hana somehow befriended half the station in the span of days. She would chat with the Talarian engineers about reactor efficiency. She would joke with the Scaleth maintenance crew about tool preferences. She would bring snacks to the night shift workers and ask about their families. "How do you do that?" he asked her one day in the commissary. "Do what?" "Talk to everyone. Make it look easy." Hana grinned around a mouthful of the vegetables he had grown for her. "I just like people. All kinds of people. You know what I've learned? Most beings in the galaxy are just trying to get through their day without too much trouble. If you're nice to them, they're usually nice back. They're scared of us. Some are, sure. But fear usually comes from not knowing something. Once they get to know us, they realize we're not that scary. Well, not scary in the ways they expected." Daewon thought about that while monitoring a new batch of seedlings. Hana was different from him, but maybe that was good. Maybe the galaxy needed to see that humans came in many varieties. Velthorax had eventually given permission for his cubs to visit again, but only with supervision. The first supervised visit was awkward, with the security chief watching every interaction like a hawk watching mice. But the cubs were so genuinely happy to see Daewon again that even Velthorax's stern demeanor softened. Kren had new questions about Earth's oceans. Yola wanted to know about Earth's moons. Thresh just wanted to sit close and listen to stories. When Hana met the cubs for the first time, Daewon worried. Her energy might be too much for them, too loud, too overwhelming. He should have known better. "Oh wow, you're Velthorax's kids." Hana had crouched down to their level immediately. "I've heard so much about you. Daewon says you're really smart and ask the best questions." The cubs had been shy at first, staying close to their father. But Hana didn't push. She just kept talking in that friendly way of hers, telling them about the engine repairs she had been doing, making it sound like an adventure. And then the plasma coupling started making this weird noise like, whoa. And I thought, oh no, that's not good, so I had to crawl into this tiny maintenance shaft, and I got stuck halfway through because my tool belt caught on a support beam. Yola giggled. "You got stuck?" "So stuck. I had to wiggle backwards like a worm." My supervisor thought it was hilarious. By the end of that visit, Thresh was showing Hana his drawings and Kren was asking her about human engineering. Even Velthorax seemed less tense. But not everyone on the station was adapting as well. The Scaleth delegation had been on the station for weeks, supposedly there to review territorial claims in the research zone. In reality, they were there to make trouble. The Scaleth were a militaristic species, proud and aggressive, and they had never liked the idea of humans joining the galactic community. Their leader was a warrior named Krath who made no secret of his contempt for Deathworlders. He saw humans as a threat, primitive savages who would disrupt the established order. Daewon tried to avoid the Scaleth delegation. He kept to his botanical wing, did his work, stayed out of sight. But avoiding them became impossible when they decided to make an issue of his presence. It started in the commissary. Daewon was getting lunch, something simple from the human-compatible food synthesizer, when Krath and 3 other Scaleth entered. They saw him immediately. "The Deathworlder," Krath said loudly, his translator giving his words a harsh edge. "Alone and unarmed. How brave." Daewon kept his eyes down, collected his food, turned to leave. Krath stepped into his path. "I did not dismiss you. I'm just getting lunch." Daewon's voice was calm, neutral. "I don't want any trouble." Trouble. That is what your kind brings. You do not belong here. This station is for civilized species, not creatures from death worlds who corrupt the young of other races. That made Daewon's eyes flick up. "I haven't corrupted anyone. You deceived the security chief's cubs, lured them to your quarters, filled their heads with propaganda about your world. This is unacceptable behavior." Other species in the commissary were watching now. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked curious about how this would play out. I told them stories. Daewon said quietly. I kept them safe when they were scared. That's all. Stories. Is that what you call it? You take advantage of children's innocence to spread your influence. Krath moved closer, using his size to intimidate. He was larger than a Krivathi, heavily armored even off duty. Humans should be quarantined, kept away from respectable species. You are animals barely capable of space travel. Daewon felt his hands tighten on his lunch tray. Old anger stirred, the kind he usually kept buried deep. But he kept his voice level. I'm not looking for a fight. Please let me pass. Or what? You will attack me? Prove that humans are as violent as the reports suggest? No. I'll ask you politely to move and hope that you're reasonable enough to let me leave in peace. Krath made a sound like a laugh. Reasonable. Your kind knows nothing of reason, only violence and chaos. Before Daewon could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Hey, Krath. Leave him alone. Hana stood in the doorway, her engineering tools still strapped to her belt. She looked small compared to the Scaleth, but her voice carried authority. The female Deathworlder, Krath said. Come to defend your male. How predictable. I came to get lunch, but yeah, I'll defend him if you keep being a jerk. Hana walked past Krath without hesitation, grabbed a food container, and stood beside Daewon. Come on, let's eat in the botanical wing. The company's better there. You should teach your female to show respect, Krath said to Daewon. Hana laughed. Oh, buddy, I'm not his anything. I make my own choices. That's kind of a human thing. Individual autonomy. Maybe you've heard of it? The commissary had gone completely silent. No one spoke to Scaleth warriors that way. No one. Krath's armored plates shifted, a sign of aggression. You are bold for such a fragile creature. I'm an engineer. I work with things that could kill me if I make a mistake. You think some posturing is going to scare me? Hana tilted her head. Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Easy way is you let us pass, and everyone goes about their day. Hard way is you try something. I file a complaint with station administration and you get a formal reprimand on your record. Your choice. For a long moment, nothing happened. Krath stared at Hana. Hana stared back, completely unfazed. Then Velthorax's voice came from the other entrance. Is there a problem here? The security chief filled the doorway and his 3 cubs were with him. They must have been on their way to lunch. Krath's expression shifted. Fighting with humans was one thing. Being seen as a threat by the security chief's cubs was another. No problem, Krath said finally. The humans were just leaving. Good. Velthorax's eyes were fixed on the Scaleth leader. Because I would hate to have to write another incident report. Paperwork is tedious. Daewon and Hana moved past Krath. As they left, Thresh broke away from his father and ran over to Daewon, grabbing his hand. Are you okay? The small Krivathi asked, his voice full of concern. Daewon felt something warm spread through his chest. I'm fine, buddy. Just a misunderstanding. That Scaleth was being mean to you. Some people are mean sometimes. It's okay. Kren and Yola had come over too, flanking Daewon and Hana protectively. 3 small predators defending the humans who had shown them kindness. The image was not lost on anyone in the commissary. Velthorax watched as his cubs escorted the humans out, and something in his expression was thoughtful. Calculating. Krath saw it too, and for the first time, the Scaleth warrior looked uncertain. Something was shifting on Helios 7. Something that would be impossible to reverse. Daewon was working late in the hydroponics bay, running final checks on a new growth cycle. The lights were dimmed for night cycle, casting the plants in soft shadow. He found these quiet hours peaceful, when most of the station was asleep and he could work without interruption. He heard them before he saw them. Small footsteps running down the corridor, then voices young and frightened. The cubs burst into the bay, all 3 of them, scales bright with distress. Kren was in the lead, with Yola and Thresh right behind him. They ran straight to Daewon. Hide us, Kren gasped. Please. Daewon immediately knelt down to their level. What's wrong? What happened? The Scalith, Yola said, her voice shaking. They were outside our quarters. They were saying things about Father, about how he's too weak protecting humans. They said they were going to prove humans are dangerous. They saw us listening, Thresh added, pressed close to his siblings. They started coming toward us. We ran, D1's mind raced. The cubs had run from adult Scalith warriors. They were being chased, and they had come here to him for protection. Okay, he said, keeping his voice calm even though his heart was pounding. Okay. First, we need to contact your father. Where is he? He was called to the docking bay. A ship was having problems. He took his security team. So Velthorax was on the other side of the station. That was bad. Can you call him? Day1 asked Kren. They took my comm unit. Said we were making it up. That we were troublemakers. We ran before they could grab us. Day1 stood, pulling his own comm unit from his pocket. But before he could activate it, he heard heavy footsteps in the corridor. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. The Scalith had followed the cubs. Behind me, Day1 said quietly, positioning himself between the children and the door. Stay close. Don't run unless I tell you to. The 3 cubs huddled behind him, their small claws gripping his lab coat. Day1 activated his comm unit one-handed, quickly sending an emergency signal to security. No message. Just the alert. It would bring help, but not fast enough. 4 Scalith entered the bay. Krath was in the lead, his armor gleaming even in the low light. The others spread out, blocking the exits. The cubs, Krath said. They belong with their father. Give them to us, no. Day1's voice was steady. They came here scared. I'm not handing frightened children over to people who scared them. You have no authority here, human. Step aside. Not going to happen. Krath moved closer, his size meant to intimidate. Up close, the Scalith was enormous. Nearly 3 meters of armored muscle built for war. Day1 was less than 2 meters and weighed maybe 70 kilograms without his clothes. The physical mismatch was absurd. You would challenge me? Krath's tone was amused. A fragile Deathworlder against a Scalith warrior? You will break like dry wood. Maybe. But you'll have to break me to get past me. Behind him, Day1 heard Thresh whimper. He felt small hands gripping tighter to his coat. Brave words. Krath took another step forward. Let me show you what happens to humans who overstep. He reached out to shove Day1 aside. Day1 didn't move. Didn't fight back. He just stood there, absorbing the push, keeping his feet planted and his body between the Scalith and the cubs. Krath's expression shifted from amusement to anger. He pushed harder, trying to force the human out of the way. Day1 staggered but caught himself. He repositioned, still blocking the path. Last warning, human. Go ahead, Day1 said quietly. Do what you're going to do. But I'm not moving. You want to get to them, you'll have to go through me. He could feel his heart hammering. His hands were shaking. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run, to move, to get away from the obvious threat. But behind him were 3 scared children who had trusted him enough to run to him for safety. He had failed to protect his own daughter once. He would not fail again. Krath drew back his arm, clearly intending to strike. Stop. The voice echoed through the bay like thunder. Velthorax filled the doorway, and behind him was his entire security team. The Kravathi's eyes were blazing, his scales dark with rage. Step away from the human. The security chief's voice was barely controlled. This was a predator on the edge of violence, held back only by the thinnest thread of civilization. Krath lowered his arms slowly. The human kidnapped your cubs. I was retrieving them. My cubs ran to the human for protection. From you. Velthorax moved into the bay, and the Scalith warriors backed up instinctively. My cubs called me. They told me what happened, that you approached them with aggression, that you threatened them, that they ran in fear. We did no such thing. We merely... They called me. Velthorax's roar made the plants shake. While you were pursuing them through my station, they used the human's comm unit to contact me. I have heard their testimony. I have reviewed the security footage. I know exactly what you did. Krath's confidence faltered. We were investigating suspicious activity. You were terrorizing children to provoke an incident. Velthorax stopped directly in front of the Scalith leader. You wanted to prove humans were dangerous. You wanted to create a situation where the human would be forced to react with violence, so you could claim justification for your prejudice. This is speculation. This is fact. Security footage shows you following my cubs. Audio records show you speaking threats within their hearing. And your own actions here, cornering them in the hydroponics bay, demonstrate clear intent to cause harm. Velthorax looked past Krath to where Daiwan still stood, the cubs pressed against his back. The human's face was pale, his hands trembling, but his feet had not moved. He had not abandoned his position. And this human, Velthorax continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous and low, this supposedly weak, fragile creature from a death world, stood between you and my children, unarmed, outnumbered, outmatched. He did not run. He did not surrender. He stood. The security team had quietly surrounded the Scaleth warriors. There would be no escape, no escalation that would end well for them. Cubs, Velthorax said, his voice softening. Come here. Kren, Yola, and Thresh ran from behind Daywan to their father, who gathered them close with his massive arms. He checked them quickly for injuries, then looked at Daywan. You are unharmed? Daywan let out a shaky breath. Yes, scared but unharmed. You protected my cubs. I did what anyone should do. No. Velthorax's eyes held something fierce and proud. You did what few would have the courage to do. You faced a threat you could not defeat with no weapon and no backup, because my children needed someone to stand for them. That is not common. That is exceptional. Hana pushed through the security team, took one look at the scene, and immediately went to Daywan. You okay? I think so, shaky. You're an idiot, she said fondly. A brave idiot, but still an idiot. Going up against Scaleth warriors unarmed? They were scared, Daywan said simply. The cubs were scared. What else was I supposed to do? Velthorax heard that exchange and understood something fundamental. This was not bravado. This was not aggression or violence. This was pure protective instinct, the same instinct that drove him to guard his own cubs with his life. He turned to Krath. You and your delegation will leave this station. Immediately. I am formally declaring you persona non grata in this sector. If you return, you will be arrested. You cannot. I can. And I will. Station security has jurisdiction here. You threatened my cubs. You created a dangerous situation. You are fortunate I do not challenge you to formal combat for this insult to my family. Krath looked at his warriors, then at the security team surrounding them, then at the human who had defied him. Finally he nodded. We will leave. See that you do. As the Scaleth were escorted out, other station residents began to appear. The commotion had drawn attention. They saw the cubs safe with their father. They saw Daywan shaking but standing. They saw Hana with her arm around her fellow human, supporting him. And they understood. In the days that followed, the story spread beyond Helios 7. It reached other stations, other worlds. The story of a human who had stood against Scaleth warriors to protect another species' children. More humans began arriving at the station. Scientists, engineers, teachers. They came with skills and knowledge, but more importantly, they came with that same quality that Daiwan and Hana had shown. They made connections. They built relationships. They protected those who needed protecting. 3 months later, Daywan was in the hydroponics bay when Velthorax found him. The security chief had something in his hands. A formal document with multiple seals. What's this? Daywan asked. An official declaration. The Krivathi Council has reviewed the incident. They have declared you a friend of the Krivathi, the first human to receive this honor. You are considered family to my clan. Under our laws, you have all the rights and protections of a Krivathi citizen. Daywan stared at the document. I don't understand. I just did what was right. Exactly. Velthorax's expression was warm. You did what was right without thought for your own safety. That is the highest honor in Krivathi culture. You are family now. The cubs ran in then, chattering excitedly. They had been waiting outside, barely able to contain themselves. Did you tell him? Kren asked his father. I told him. We helped write the declaration, Yola announced proudly. We told them how you protected us, how you were brave. Thresh hugged Daywan's leg. You're our family now, forever. Daywan felt tears prick his eyes. He knelt down, gathering the 3 cubs close. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for trusting me. Hana appeared in the doorway, grinning. Hey, family meeting and nobody invited me? The human Hana is also included, Velthorax said with what might have been amusement. The cubs insisted. They said any friend of Daewon is family to them. Damn right, Hana said, joining the group hug. We're a weird family, but we're family. Outside the hydroponics bay, the station continued its work. But something had changed fundamentally. Humans were no longer avoided, no longer treated with suspicion. They were welcomed. Because the galaxy had learned what Velthorax and his cubs already knew. Humans were dangerous, yes, but not because of violence or aggression. They were dangerous because they made you care, because they protected fiercely, because they built families from strangers and called them home. And once a human decided you were theirs to protect, nothing in the galaxy could make them abandon you. Not even the threat of death itself.